So this is the part A of the Khoodeelaar television channel being broadcast at 09:55 GMT on Friday, 23rd of June 2023. Now this is the introduction that we have updated. So using the phrase corrupt media, and the corrupt media is meant to denote and represent and stand for the corrupt Western media, press, radio, television, and allied social outlets operated across Western Europe, USA, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. And we shall be updating the spelling of these words. And the corrupt media lies about all the objective values included in the founding aims and purposes of the United Nations organization. Corrupt media persists in ignoring the starvation by Bangladesh, the regime in Bangladesh today of the Rohingyas in Coxs BazaR, where the main population, the demography of the Rohingya refugees has been based by banning the Rohingyas from working, while the United Nations has been denying basic living income to the Rohingyas. So this is guaranteed to starve thousands and thousands of Rohingyas. And the corrupt media are tackling Elvis Presley ever so carefully. The corrupt media has been hiding the truth about the crooks. The crooks, David Cameron and George Osborne. And their role in starving the people in the United Kingdom during their stay in the posts as so-called conservative government in the United Kingdom, when the pair of those criminals held the posts of Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and the position of the so-called Chancellor of the Exchequer, that is the Finance Minister of the United Kingdom. These criminals have given unnecessary, unjustified platforms during the beginning of the so-called COVID-19 inquiries. These criminals do not deserve to be given any say, but they have been given the say. And what they have been doing with the say is denying that their attacks on the society and the fund for the society did not have any role in causing the lack of of preparations to face the COVID-19. So these criminals are being allowed to tell the lies without the truth being told, rebutting these lies by Cameron and Osborne. There is no say on behalf of the tellers of the truth, rebutting the criminals' lies before the inquiry. And this is one of the main features of inquiries in Britain, that gives platform for liars to repeat the lies, and then these lies are then included as the records of the proceedings of the inquiries without any explanation as to how the liars are being given additional platforms to repeat their lies, to add insult to the injuries that they caused originally. And there is no explanation, there has been no explanation in the British media about the multiple criminal George Osborne, who at the same time was supposed to be holding 6 or 7 separate jobs. How is that possible? How is that possible? It is impossible to even hold 2 jobs at the same time. Yet this criminal, liar, crook, thief has been allowed to hold 6 or 7 jobs. And the inquiry so-called chair, the inquiry so-called legal advisor didn't ask this criminal the questions. Similarly, with David Cameron, that crook stole hundreds of millions of pounds after leaving the post of Prime Minister. And he stole money from another crook in Australia or from Australia. And in the platform that he was given, the crook Cameron was not asked how he justified that and how could any rational, reasonable justification be offered for his criminality. And there has been no explanation as to why, despite all the details being published of the criminality by Cameron, he was not prosecuted. He has not been prosecuted. So this is the corrupt media. They don't point this out. Similarly, when the congenital liar Boris Johnson, the criminal, was finally ousted as a member of parliament, well, that ouster took place because he, the congenital liar Boris Johnson, didn't want to be facing the world, facing the public by being put in the so-called witness box, let's say. where he would have been asked to explain his theft and lying. Essentially, the procedure in the UK Parliament that has been operated for a very long time concerning when a member of Parliament is invalidated by their behavior and they are no longer entitled to sit as member of Parliament. They cannot be sacked. So the procedure that has been used to hide this criminality that is embedded in the British so-called unwritten constitution is that this particular MP is given a job under the Crown. And the procedure then says that if a member of Parliament is employed by the Crown, even if the salary is £1 or something like that, then as soon as they get that kind of job, they cease to be entitled to sit as a member of Parliament, which is what was done with John Stonehouse, who stole the money under the various initiatives he did, abusing his role in the 1971 Bangladesh funds. So John Stonehouse was given the job under the Crown, and so therefore, after he was given the job, he was declared no longer an MP, which is what has happened decades later with the congenital liar Boris Johnson. But the point that arises about Boris Johnson, because in the case of John Stonehouse, he was prosecuted and he was found guilty and he was imprisoned. But Boris Johnson has not been prosecuted for any crime, nor has David Cameron, nor has George Osborne. All three of those criminals can be prosecuted, should be prosecuted, but they're being allowed to get away without being prosecuted for their thefts. Now, going back to Osborne's 6 or 7 jobs, there is a thing called the Declaration or Register of Members' Interests. There should be an equivalent register of former members of government declaring all their sources of income and all the so-called jobs, as in the case of George Osborne. But Osborne has not been required to declare the jobs and declare the various incomes and declared, most importantly, what, if any, contribution he actually makes to justify being in any of these 6 or 7 jobs at the same time. What Osborne has been doing is exceeding, has been allowed to exceed the logical capacity. How can one individual be said to be holding 6 or 7 jobs all at the same time? Where is the extra abilities coming from, the skills coming from? Where does he get the time? If the ordinary day is only 24 hours, the ordinary day is 12 hours, let's say, then if you multiply 6 or 7 jobs, it is more than 100 hours every day. How can a day be extended to more than 100 hours? The day can only be extended, only be allowed 12 hours, half of the 24 hours cycle. So these irrationalities and stupidities and brazen lies and impossibilities are being allowed to go unchallenged, and the likes of the criminal George Osborne being allowed to go unheld to account. Same applies to David Cameron. Where did he get the justification for pocketing hundreds of millions of pounds? What did he contribute? And on what evidence? Same applies to his co criminal, the Australian. So, all of these are allowed to remain unasked. All these questions are allowed to remain unasked, unexplored, unprobed, uninvestigated by the mainstream press, mainstream radio, mainstream television across England, across the UK, across Western world, the opportunity to work, the right to work, which they need in order to get the basic income to survive. Just at the time when the United Nations agency that is supposed to be distributing the survival, the living token living money to the Rohingyas, has cut its support for the Rohingyas. And there is no outcry. And so these are the basic general facts in the background, in the context of which we are doing this broadcast. So the main news in the so-called emotional humanitarian sector in the British so-called Fleet Street, the British press, also known as the Fleet Street Papers, is the information or the news that the five people who are being described today as tourists who went to tour the site of the Titanic, and the report now in the last 24 hours that all five of them died in the very sudden impact that occurred in the what is the Murdoch scum saying? Well, so the catastrophic implosion killed all crew on Titanic expedition. Well, it wasn't an expedition; it was a tour, and the scum says, as sub debris is found, they had no chance. And it's the scum that is saying they are tourists. Tourists died instantly as vessel imploded. They are tourists. Now, if the scum can call them tourists, then why is the scum and the co-liars condemning this particular observer who is being condemned as a left-winger called Ash Sarkar? Ash Sarkar said that the fact that they can go on this kind of tour, she used words to the effect. I'm not really at this moment, but she effectively meant tourists. If they could afford to do that, then it shows that they were not paying enough taxes. And the whole of the corrupt right wing media is condemning her for making that comment. But the scam is not being condemned. The scam is part of the so called friends of the five tourists that have died. Now contrast that. What is the what is the fee that each tourist has paid for their kind of ticket, if you like, or the seat? They paid anything up to a quarter million, let's say, pounds. Now, if they can pay a quarter of a million pounds for this adventure, isn't it rational and reasonable to ask the question about the whole context, the whole poverty issue? The United Kingdom, the press makes ritual kind of reference to cost of living. It doesn't say the word poverty. It doesn't say the poverty that has been deliberately created. It says cost of living. And by calling it cost of living, it takes away the actual responsibility from the criminal regime that is causing the cost of living, the poverty. For example, the so called opposition, Keir Starmer, the opposition is fronted by Keir Starmer. And Keir Starmer, we call him the political murderer of the Labour Party. Why do we call him the political murderer of the Labour Party? Because all the founding aims and objects of the Labour Party are crushed, denied, concealed, and he is behaving like a version of the Conservatives. That's what the are calling him the political murderer of the Labour Party, because when and if he gets in the kind of seat of power, if you like, he will not be bringing in policies that would implement the founding aims and objects of the Labour Party. It would not bring an end to the criminality of punishing people like the people of Poplar 100 years ago by the Conservatives, where the Poplar councillors had to risk and actually go to jail while defending the ratepayers in the then Poplar Borough Council in the East End of London. So the people in Poplar 100 years ago, the councillors, were actually carrying out the aims and objects underlying the foundation of the Labour Party. Keir Starmer will not do that. He will continue to carry out the policies of the Conservatives, penalizing the poor, penalizing the low income, and penalizing the people who have been deprived of basic income. When Keir Starmer was the post holder as the Director of Public Prosecutions or DPP, he was frontman for the Crown Prosecution Service, CPS, just before he ended his 5 year stint as the DPP at the CPS. Keir Starmer brought in executive measures so that the lowest income group people making claims for help, which they could only DWP, deprivation, want, and poverty creation, DWP. He actually brought in additional obstruction, additional obstacles, so that the most in need of help would be further denied of help that they needed and they actually needed to in order to survive. This actually relates to the policies of George Osborne that we've been talking about earlier. George Osborne had, as the finance minister, a relevant murderer, mass murderer, in post of the DWP Secretary of State, Ian Dracula Duncan Smith. Now, Ian Dracula Duncan Smith made it impossible for the lowest income people, people in the most severe hardship, to easily claim money that they needed in order to live. And when the DWP prevented them, denied them the money, some of these people are so desperate that they took their own lives. Many of them committed suicide. So when we call Keir Starmer the political murderer of the Labour Party, we don't mean just theoretically. He actually colluded, collaborated with the policies that Ian Dracula Duncan Smith had actually carried out. And he colluded just before he ended his 5 year stint as the holder of the post of DPP at the CPS. Let's check what the accessible references to the okay, so this is the sample. So there is a item from the Disability News Service dated the 24th of November 2022, and it reads, a whistleblower has spoken of her horror after learning how a disabled woman took her own life following pressure from the universal credit that is operated by DWP under the procedures introduced by the DWP when Ian Dracula Duncan Smith was Secretary of State. Then there is another item again from the Disability News Service.com dated the 27th of March 2022, and it says in the heading, the Department for Work and Pensions, which is what we call the deprivation, want and poverty creation. It's a Department for Work and Pensions, which is based in a building called Caxton House in Southwest London. Department for Work and Pensions deaths cover up and a toxic 30-year legacy. That is dated the 27th of March 2022. And it says in the heading Benefits and Poverty. Evidence stretching back more than a decade shows how the Department for Work and Pensions, DWP, which we call deprivation, want, and poverty creation, repeatedly ignored recommendations to improve the safety of its disability benefits assessment system, leading to countless avoidable deaths of disabled claimants. Now, we are not calling it avoidable deaths, we are calling it massacre and murders because they knew they were causing, and that's what was inevitable as a consequence of them withholding money. So, evidence stretching back more than a decade shows how the Department for Work and Pensions, deprivation, want, and poverty creation, we call it, repeatedly ignored recommendations to improve the safety of its disability benefits assessment system, leading to countless avoidable deaths of disabled claimants. Other evidence shows how DWP ensured that key evidence linking its actions with those deaths was not considered by independent reviews, and how the department failed to keep track of what actions were taken in response to recommendations made by its own civil servants to improve the system. But the evidence also demonstrates that the cultural problems within the DWP extend far beyond the assessment system, touching all aspects of its dealings with disabled people in the social security system, and how the roots of its toxic culture stretch back at least 30 years. The evidence compiled over the last decade by Disability News Service and also by other journalists, academics, and activists shows systematic systemic negligence by DWP, a culture of cover up and denial, and a refusal to accept that the department has a duty of care to those disabled people claiming support through the social security system. And it goes on like that. Now, point is that this is what Keir Starmer was doing, what the DWP has been doing for 30 years, according to this item. Keir Starmer made even worse by adding the new obstacles before he left the DPP job. And then there is another item dated the 26th of February 2020. Had a DWP destroyed reports into claimants who committed suicide. The DWP has been accused of a cover up after destroying reports into suicides linked to benefits. Being stopped, reports independent.co.uk. Now, independent, we shall go to the independent news website shortly. A National Audit Office report published this month, that was in March 2020, concluded that it is highly unlikely that the 69 claimants' deaths the DWP has investigated represent the number of cases it could have investigated in the past 6 years, of course. The National Audit Office also highlighted that here was no systematic tracking or monitoring of the lessons that emerged from the reviews. As a result, the department does not know whether the suggested improvements are actually implemented. This week, Debbie Abrams MP fought back tears in the Commons as she read out a list of 24 people who died after problems with their benefits. On the 69 DWP reviews since 2015, Debbie Abrams told ministers, "This is just the tip of the iceberg. We do not even know the actual number of people who have taken their own lives as a result of what they went through." Ken Butler, DRUK's welfare rights and policy advisor, said Linda Cooksey and the family of other deceased claimants have been fighting for years for copies of the DWP reviews in their deaths to be sent to them. They should have been sent as a matter of basic human decency for the families to see what factors may have left to their loved ones taking their own lives. Now, this is not human decency. This is part of the international declarations, treaties that the United Kingdom has actually signed up to as part of its various hundreds of treaties and declarations that the United Kingdom is a signatory to. And even the Disability Benefit Service on News Service is following a timid line by not referring to or acknowledging the existence of the treaties, existence of the rights and the obligations that a signatory country like the United Kingdom is under according to those treaties. So we go back to what we say about the United Kingdom being actually run by the mentality of little Englanders. They think the operational thinking, the conditioning of the mind is based on the view that England is the center of the world and the rest of the world doesn't exist. That is what little Englishness, little Englander mentality does, and that is what it represents. This is the independent.co.uk. It is headed, it's a piece dated the 26th of February 2020. And it's headed Cover Up. DWP destroyed reports into people who killed themselves after benefits were stopped. Now, how is it this is the kind of culture of suppression that pervades, that dominates the British media, UK media. Even the likes of the Independent, which has published on rare occasions exceptional glimpses of the actual behavior of the UK government, central government, in causing the murders, the massacres, the starving people to death. So there is complete, absolute, and utter silence from the so called opposition, official opposition in the UK House of Commons, which is the main legislature. It's a two-cameral, bicameral system. The House of Peers, which they call House of Lords, and the House of Commons. House of Commons is the one where elected MPs are sent, and it consists of elected people. But the House of Peers, which is the House of Lords, is not made up of elected people, but it has the role constitutionally of revising the legislation that eventually both the House of Lords and the House of Commons, of course, the so called opposition elements, have remained in effect silent about the massacres of the poorest in this country. And the massacres of the poorest in this country will continue to go on if and when the Labour Party or the opposition, if it is fronted by Keir Starmer, takes office after the some think expected defeat at the next election of the Conservatives. But it is not necessarily certain that the Conservatives will be defeated. And despite the fact that all the elements, all the evidence shows that they should be defeated, they should be ousted, but it isn't certain because the culture operated by the media is a culture of complacence and collusion with the Little England mentality of allowing the poorest to be massacred, to be murdered, and to be denied and deprived of the basic human rights. And it is in this context, it is in view of that culture that the hostility to migrants and immigrants should be seen. There is hostility to migrants' human rights. And human rights is not a phrase that the so called opposition actually uses. Even when Jeremy Corbyn, who is overstated as a supporter of the human rights of the people who are at the receiving end of the injustice perpetrated by the conservatives or the conservatives dominated culture in this country, even he has no association with 90% on the occasions that he could have associated himself with demanding human rights be implemented. He doesn't have that. The only interest groups that Jeremy Corbyn on his records while he was in post as leader of the opposition Labour Party is with the trade unions. That's it. And that is evidence of the fact that Jeremy Corbyn has always been unfit for purpose, intellectually deficient, and politically lacking in strategy and enlightenment and leadership and initiative, as I have pointed out many, many times. So you've got this particular edition at 44 minutes. We shall check on the situation in Pakistan where Imran Khan is being hounded and harassed and silenced. Now, there is a piece one day ago on The Guardian by somebody from Pakistan which says, I literally cannot say Imran Khan's name on Pakistan television. This madness has to end. And this is the piece by a contributor called Hamid Mir, appears to be a man. Hamid is usually the man's first name. Whoever wins in the confrontation between the former prime minister and the army in Pakistan, both sides are to blame for trying to gag criticism. And then there is an introduction under that subheading which says Hamid Mir is a Pakistani television news anchor and author. And this is posted at 1400 hours BST, which would be 1300 hours GMT on Wednesday, the 21st of June 2023, on the Guardian website. And there is a picture of a civilian man or a man in civilian clothing being dragged by one military person and beaten with a stick by another one. And the caption says, Police detained a supporter of Imran Khan in Lahore last month. Photographed by K.M. Chaudhry, stroke AP. Now, it doesn't say in the caption by the fucking Guardian that the man is being assaulted, physically beaten up. It says detained. Fuck the fucking Guardian. I'm not a big fan of Imran Khan, says Hamid Mir. I have long criticized Pakistan's former prime minister, but now it's becoming difficult to do so. There is a de facto ban on referring to him in the media, meaning we are no longer allowed to mention his name or show his picture. Pakistani television channels are not allowed to interview him on air or air his statements. This is the result of a series of directives issued by the media regulator. As Prime Minister, Imran Khan tried to turn Pakistan from a struggling democracy into an autocracy. His successor, Shahbaz Sharif, appears to be following in his footsteps. Now, this is the line that this Hamid Mir is taking. I'm not going to read the whole piece, but that is the piece. Now, this means that even those who are critical of Imran Khan cannot critically mention him. It's fascism. It's fascism in Pakistan under the military. And the United Nations is silent. The United Kingdom is silent. The USA is silent. The European Union is silent. So, what are these organizations and entities supporting in the subcontinent? Of course, they're supporting the fascist from India, Narendra Modi, who has been traveling the United States and being feted by Joe Biden. While in India itself, the northeastern region of Manipur and other places are in turmoil. The whole of the northeast of India, or the Republic of India now, has always been treated as a colony by the mainly Gujarati, Punjabi, Marathi coalition that is in the northeast has been Mamata Banerjee, West Bengal chief minister. And she has said recently that she wrote to Modi or the central government months ago expressing her concern about what was going on in Manipur and the rest of the region. She only got a reply a few days ago. That is the contempt for human rights, for democracy, so called Indian secularism that the Hindutva regime of fascist Modi and his fascist co criminal Amit Shah, the so called Home Secretary, they have. And the statement by Sonia Gandhi, whose name should be actually Sonia Nehru, because Gandhi is a misleading name. True that Indira Nehru was married to a man with the surname Gandhi. He is a Persian man, and his name Gandhi is not what is invoked whenever the Gandhi name is mentioned with the Nehrus, because people think it is related to M.K. Gandhi. Mohanlal Karamchand Gandhi, who is also known as the Gandhi. So, in order to correct the evidence and the brainwashing, we have been using Nehru whenever talking about the Nehru family, Nehru's descendants, like Sonia Nehru, Rajiv Nehru, Indira Nehru. So, what Sonia Nehru has said in the last week about what is happening in Manipur is so timid and so embarrassingly ignorant and stupid that I'm not going to even quote that. Suffice to say that if there is any particular part of the Indian establishment that can be blamed for the appearance of the Hindutva fascists Modi and Amit Shah et al. In power at the center of the Indian Republic, then it is the role played by Jawaharlal Nehru during the entirety of his career and by his daughter and by their party. They are the ones who created the mentality, the Hindutva superior mentality, the result of which has been the actual removal of further rights from the people of Kashmir who are not to be confused with Indians because the Kashmiris are not Indians. Kashmiris are independent people that have been occupied by the Hindutva Brahmins. Before the Hindutva regime came into being, Nehru actually supported the Brahminists agenda, and it was the Brahminists agenda that prevailed while Nehru held sway. Nehru passed away in the early 1960s. So it was a good, that is to say, in terms of the number of years, not good in terms of the quality of delivery. It was a good 12, 13 years that Nehru was in power after the 15th of August 1947. But during those years, Nehru did everything to suppress the international human rights of the Kashmiris and to suppress the many, many resolutions by the United Nations in support of the Kashmiris. That is, the resolutions that the United Nations passed were in support of the Kashmiris. So, what Nehru did in Kashmir, violating the Kashmiris, actually created the context, created the atmosphere for the suppression of the people of the Northeast, what is called the Seven Sisters. That is, there are seven small states across the Northeast of India or the Northeast of Indian Republic. All of them are adjacent to Bangladesh. And what is happening in the Northeast and the Seven Sisters is that they are being treated as little states, but they are given the kind of status of being fourth or fifth level of equality, if you like, in the Indian Republic. And the Congress party, of which Sonia Nehru is the token president or chair, has been politically colluding with the Hindutva operations fronted by Modi and Amit Shah. And what is happening is that the Indian media absolutely colludes with the Hindutva narrative, as does the Indian judiciary. Indian Supreme Court is a joke. The Indian court bureaucracy and hierarchies are absolute jokes and platform for criminals and fascists and Hindutva propaganda. So, what Sonia Nehru has said has had no effect, will not have any effect, and the media is not saying anything, nor is the judiciary doing anything. And against all that background, Joe Biden, who has been condemned by the ordinary polled voters in the US as being too old, has behaved typically as too old, and he's hardly in connection with what is happening in India with Modi. What Joe Biden is doing is creating a pretense of a friendship with the Hindutva regime so that they can beat China with that so called special relationship. That's what is happening. So Biden couldn't care less about the people of the northeast of India or the rest of the Indian Republic, where the human rights of non Hindutva people are being violated daily. Non Hindu girls and women are being raped, mass raped, gang raped, massacred, murdered. No concern by the United States at all. As for the British press, especially the likes of the Financial Times, which is edited by this woman, Rola Khala, who was supposed to have been brought up in the Lebanon as a Muslim, and who is now completely detached herself from the any traceable traceable evidence of awareness any awareness of the violations by the Western media of the human rights of the Muslims anywhere in the United Kingdom, Western Europe, in the rest of the world. And she may have been in the past identified as a person who was raised as a Muslim, was born as a Muslim in the Lebanon, but she no longer has that connection. And what she is doing is she's not exposing, reporting on the excesses, the violations of human rights in India under Modi. But contrasting that, she has actually run several false condemning Imran Khan. And it is widely believed that she has done that at the promptings of Nawaz Sharif and other anti democratic elements that want Pakistan to sink into further abyss of anti democratic, authoritarian, fascistic violations. All of these can be contrasted with the aims stated by Imran Khan and the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf of creating in Pakistan a free, a genuine independence state. Hakiki Azadi, that is a reference back to the 14th of August 1947, when Pakistan was officially declared a republic. A day later, the Indians were given the same declaration. Although it was a day later, the main weight of support behind the Indians, fronted at that time by Nehru, Jawaharlal Nehru, and the supporter being Mountbatten, the cousin of the late Queen Brenda, was for the regime fronted by Jawaharlal Nehru. And Mountbatten's wife, Edwina, was actually the adulterous partner of Jawaharlal Nehru. And Mountbatten knew that. The British knew that. And they allowed that to happen because that was like Churchill's use of his son's wife as a spy during the Second so called World War. When Churchill told his son's wife to sleep with rich Americans as part of his way of seducing rich Americans to support Britain against the Germans. So there is no morality, there is no ethics whatsoever, which is why, despite the fact that the congenital liar Boris Johnson is a prolific adulterer and sexual abuser, there is no scandal surrounding his sexual abuses and adultery. We shall, of course, continue to update on these in due course. Let's check what is happening on Tower Hamlets. So there is a piece about the sentence in the Old Bailey on the 14th of June 2023 of a hate criminal, Eric Feld, who has been convicted of murdering Ranjit Kankanamala, Malaj, who was violently murdered in the Tower Hamlets Cemetery Park on the 16th of August 2021. And in the statement that has been scripted for the liar, Luthuraman, it says, together with partners, including the police, we will continue to work to improve community safety, tackle all forms of hate and discrimination, and promote equity. Now, this is not the word that should be used, it's equality. Equity is a financial term. Diversity and inclusion for all the communities we serve, including LGBTQ and people. Anyone impacted by the hate crimes of any type should always report it. Now, that's a lie. Just the extent of lying by Luthuraman and the Town Council that he fronts is so vast and so huge and so unacceptable and illegal and hurtful that it will take extra essay length editions to detail, which we shall do in due course. There is no truth in any suggestion made either by Luthuraman himself or by Town Council that he fronts currently. The Town Council is respectful of the people who are targets or recipients of injustice, generally in the community or especially by Tarham's Council. Tarham's Council is a corrupt council, it's a lying council, and Lutfur Rahman is corrupt and is a liar, and he has been lying and he has been behaving corruptly throughout the period since he became incumbent in the post of mayor, elected mayor in October 2010. As far as the opposition, Labour Party is concerned, which is what the opposition is, the Labour Party, there is no qualitative difference between Lutfur Rahman as the fronter of the regime and the Labour Party representing the regime at any given time. For example, when Lutfur Rahman was ousted by the election commissioner Richard Mori on the 23rd of April 2015, the person who became the next incumbent in the post of mayor was John Biggs. And John Biggs created no difference in terms of the quality of accountability or the fact of accountability by Tarham's Council to the community at all. So that remained the case from 11th of June 2015 when Biggs became incumbent as a result of the repeat election for the mayor that took place following the Richard Mori decision until the 5th of May 2022 when John Biggs was replaced. The Labour Party in Tower Hamlets, either as among the elected councillors in the Labour Party's name or the Labour Party bureaucracy that operates outside of the council, is as corrupt, as ignorant, as prejudiced, biased, unfit for purpose now as it has always been. A woman called Jenny Fisher, who has been the main white driver of many of the scripts mouthed by Lutfur Rahman, is a corrupt, racist liar. Jenny Fisher was the corrupt, racist liar during the particular period that I was involved as a member of the management committee in the Labour Party in Bethnal Green. And Jenny Fisher was supposed to be chairing a thing called the local government committee. And Jenny Fisher held the meetings of the local government committee, which was supposed to be auditing the then leadership separately, succeeding one another by Abbas Uddin alias Halal and then Michael Crook, the Michael Kidd. And all the efforts on my part as a member of the local government committee to extract information based on facts were sabotaged, opposed, obstructed by the racist criminal liar Jenny Fisher. I hereby challenge that racist liar criminal to deny that. And colluding with the racist criminal liar Jenny Fisher was the completely useless individual who pretended to be not a centrist racist, but he was there as well. He lives in the flat, or used to live in the flat near the Watney Market. Now, that racist criminal liar is now the main driver of the scripts written for Lutfur Rahman. What can you expect? What can you expect? There was another Jenny Boswell Jones, who also aided and abetted Lutfur Rahman. And these people used Lutfur Rahman in the same way as Ken Livingston Livingston used Lutfur Rahman as an ethnic extension of their own political control. Because Lutfur Rahman numerically, demographically, has the wider number of support than either Jenny Fisher or Ken Livingston in the borough of Tar Hamlets, they transform themselves into Lutfur Rahman and use him as a Trojan horse for their agenda, which is why not all of the, but some of the phrases and expressions that are found in Lutfur Rahman's statement or the statements that are issued in Lutfur Rahman's name appear to be kind of sympathetic to so called left wing or socialist causes. And it is Jenny Fisher who is really responsible for the connections with the so called left wing socialist outlets that keep praising Lutfur Rahman, despite the fact that those outlets themselves are anti Muslim, racist, corrupt, pro fascist, and so on. So I'm giving Jenny Fisher this warning that she's a liar, she's a racist, she's a criminal, and she's an anti democratic element. So there is Jenny Fisher, there was Jenny Boswell Jones, who is not any more as active as she was before. And there is a handful of other white skinned individuals. These are the only ones that are to be found as representing the white part of the demography in the cabal that is now operated by the Fronta Lutfur Rahman. The rest of Lutfur Rahman's frontage consists of criminals and liars and mental slaves that come from the mainly Bangladeshi community, but they don't really represent the truthful, honest, ethical, moral, democratic, accountable forces or powers or demands. We shall be continuing the updates on this. And what Jenny Fisher has done is maintained silence on the legal, constitutional, ethical duties owed to Shamima Begum and the other three girls by Towners Council, which has had the safeguarding children duties to children. And these children, these four girls from Bethnal Green, were children when they were groomed, when they were brainwashed, and when they were misled into leaving the country and going into Syria. So we shall be ending this one at 11:12 hours GMT or 11:13 hours GMT, and the duration is 1 hour 17 minutes. Part A of the Khudeelaar television channel.